Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
This episode is brought to you by Nourish by Nature Made, the #1 pharmacist-recommended vitamin and supplement brand. Nourish is a personalized vitamin regimen customized to you. Backed by 45 years of science, they remove the guesswork from your vitamin regimen. With thousands of happy customers, Nourish is a trusted supplement brand by many. Visit Nourish.com to create your customized package today.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht.
Hello and welcome to the Football Grad Gegenpressing podcast. Yeah, that's right. I am hosting today. My name is Manuel Veth. Filling in for Bryce, who's busy getting engaged in Spain, I guess. So congrats to Bryce. Hope you know what you're getting into. Anyways, joining me as always, Chris. How are you doing, Chris? Something you and I don't really have to worry about anymore, eh?
No, I've been married 17 years now. So, yeah, I'm probably looking at the other way of how to get out of it. I'm only joking if obviously my wife's listening. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Busy week. English week, wasn't it? And then it's just been such a strange week. There was one day of no football of Bundesliga 1, but there's Bundesliga 2 on. So we've had a really busy week. And then obviously we've got European fixtures coming this coming week. So yeah, we're pretty busy gegenpressing at the moment, aren't we? Yeah,
we are very busy. And, you know, we had to find someone to replace us, replace Bryce. And, John, he was so good last week that we thought, oh, we might as well bring him on more regularly. John, how are you doing? You are not engaged, I assume?
I'm not engaged at present, no, but are you sure that my invite on has got nothing to do with the Gladbach result this week?
We can talk about that in great detail soon.
Actually, we're going to talk about that first, John. Thanks for reminding me. Yes, we need to talk about Gladbach a little bit, don't we? The result on the weekend and then the result on midweek. And then, yeah, should we talk about what happened midweek first, John? You want to talk us through that at the Gladbach result, or do you want to go straight in and
I can't remember what happened midweek. It's so long ago now in football, isn't it?
Yeah, so Tuesday, and that's actually, you did the preview for the Stuttgart game, and I thought that was actually an excellent game, and you were a little bit more pessimistic about the Stuttgart-Gladbach result, and Gladbach smashed that one 2-0, and I thought Gladbach did well. Raphael had a really good game, and you and I were chatting, and you were a little bit concerned about a little bit of a slower start, and you know, he does take a little bit longer, not only because he's also getting on in age. I think he's 33 now, but it's just, you know, traditionally he's always taking a few years and a few games until he's, you know, warming up into a season. So I thought he actually looked really good. And that was actually a good result for Gladbach, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. I think especially given that for a period in the second half, Stuttgart looked quite good. Asasiba obviously is a great player and was controlling the game for a period. He was picking the ball up deep and carrying it into quite dangerous areas before laying it off. So I was a little bit nervous until the penalty went in that the result maybe would have gone the other way.
Yeah, and then of course, maybe before we talk about the big Saturday game, Chris, Dortmund against HSV midweek. We expect that result, didn't we? 3-0. Not a huge surprise. I mean, we went into this game. I think I did the preview for this one, and I think I said 2-0 or 3-0. Can't remember, but they did what was expected of them.
Yeah, they did, and it was comfortable in the end, wasn't it? Obviously took a one goal early lead, and then their dominance just prevailed throughout. It didn't really look in any sort of threat at any time. It was I know when you win 3-0, it's always a good result, but it was definitely a bit of a cruise for me. It could have been maybe more, and it was good to see Kagawa score, and he scored an excellent goal, I thought. And it reminded me a little bit of last season, Manu, when plenty of times Dortmund were on top, had the better possession, had the better run of the play, but just couldn't score. And then if they could score, the floodgates had opened, and it did start to remind me of that a little. But once they got the goal, it was always when they were going to get the second, although I did have a little think and a little worry for a while that maybe they may concede, and we saw that a couple of times last year. But I think Bosch has ironed out some of those troubles that Tuchel was getting. I think that's because at times he wasn't playing his best 11 in the shape that we now all know, which fits the team the best, which is a 4-3-3, which he's doing a lot of at the moment. And I think it's paying massive dividends as they're top of the league and high flying.
Yeah, and they are high flying. I mean, I'm looking, and John, we unfortunately need to talk about what happened on Saturday night. And I'm just going to rattle off some of these statistics before we discuss this. So the result, of course, 6-1. Dortmund's ball possession was 79%. Total shots 18-8. Shots on target 9-5. Shots off target 6-3. Shots inside the box 13-7. Big chances created 9-1. Hit the woodwork 3-0. Wow. Passes 917-245. You want me to keep going?
You can end if you'd like.
That is, and this Gladbach are a good side, but is this, how do you explain something like that when you go from the Stuttgart game and you absolutely get thrown under the wheels by a rampant Borussia Dortmund side?
Yeah, I was disappointed because I think Dieter Hecking is an experienced coach, and it seems as though he didn't change his tactics in any way other than by telling the team to drop deeper. And they defended in two banks of four. They dropped their two strikers behind the centre circle, and they seem to think that would be enough for everything to be okay. The problem is with that sort of approach that you then invite pressure for the whole game. It's hardly surprising that the possession stats are up in the 70s, that the passing stats are through the roof. For me, and I said this in my preview for Fußballstart, with the two-man midfield of Zakaria and Kramer against a central midfield three of Weigl, Dahoud and Goetze, you're going to lose that battle every day of the week. And I was suggesting, look, why play with two strikers in that sort of game? Drop one of the strikers, bring in another central midfielder. And I mentioned Michael Cuisance, who they eventually did bring on. And after that point, I think they conceded maybe another goal, maybe two. But it was a lot more solid when they went with three in the midfield area. So I was a bit disappointed because I felt as though Gladbach, like you say, they had a lot that they could have done to make the game different. They did create a couple of chances. Torgan Hazard had a couple of decent chances, which had they gone in, it would have changed things. But for me, it was just badly thought through. And as soon as it went wrong, it just went very wrong.
Yeah. And I think this is something that I thought Dortmund's midfield, of course, all the eye was on Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who scored 3, and Maximilian Philipp, who scored 2. The two were fantastic. Christian Pulisic wasn't great, something that you pointed out as well, Chris. But that midfield, they had essentially 3 holding midfielders playing, because Götze, Weigl, Dahoud are 3 midfielders who can not only create something, but also hold onto the ball and, have very accurate passing statistics. And I think that's how you rack up those passes. You have 3 guys who can just pass the ball so well to each other. And I thought they were like clockwork, Borussia Dortmund in midfield. With 3 midfielders like that, that's something that's really hard to defend, because all of a sudden you have 3 creative guys, who can create time and space. And that makes it really easy for the Phillips and Aubameyangs of this world to create scoring chances.
Yeah, it did. And occasionally a team will play at their very best. They'll come against a team who are playing probably at their very worst. And I think there's a bit of a mixture of that over the weekend. I thought Dortmund were exceptional and Gladbach were well off form. And those two the meeting of those two situations resulted in, a 6-1 demolition. But it was that midfield three that stuck out for me. I thought they were excellent. They're interchangeable at times. And you're quite right, they're so creative. And although they did have the majority possession, 79%, and you mentioned those, the passes of accuracy passes was 843, compared to, Gladbach's 168. I mean, that 92% passing accuracy, that's incredible. And one of the statistics sites gave Maximilian Philippe a 9.9 out of 10, which is a massive score. So buy into stats as much as you want on that. But he did have a pretty perfect game. I thought he was excellent. But it is, I don't know, maybe worrying's the wrong term, but it's a couple of games now on the bounce where Pulisic's been a little under weather. I know he was given man of the match for the game against HSV, but he was still under par for me. I don't know if he's getting too much pressure put on his shoulders by his home audience in America, who all of a sudden have just elevated him to this massive position. There was a piece on ESPN this week about, is he the greatest ever American football, as in soccer player? He's such a young guy. He doesn't really need this extra pressure to be lumped on him. He's playing in a team where, his creativity and his ability to just go and play is allowed. Just let him get on with it. I think he's been given too much pressure. I mean, Manu, we chatted over WhatsApp, didn't we? Because obviously you're in North America, so you get the Fox Sports feed, and they really have built him up the past few weeks into something that maybe he's not yet there. We all know he's a fantastic talent, but he's a young guy and he's developing constantly. And let's not forget that he probably won't be in his prime for another 5 to 6 years. So it's a lot of pressure to be on his shoulders, but don't let that distract from his contribution. On the midweek game, he was excellent. He was a little below par over the weekend, but he still contributed well. And it was a really good performance and a fantastic performance to take into Tuesday's game when obviously back-to-back Champions League winners Real Madrid come to town. Yeah,
it's just maybe one thing on Pulisic. And it adds to what you just said, the pressure. And there was recently I can't remember which American site it was, but it was one of the big ones, SB Nation, ESPN, or Fox. And they tweeted out a picture with Pulisic, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Messi. And the headline said, Pulisic has scored more often before turning 19 than Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi did. And that's a comparison that he's a fantastic player. He's a really, really good player. And Dortmund, I think one of the reasons why they were able to just sell off Dembele and took that risk is because they knew they had him. But hold off a little, if you load them up with this kind of pressure, especially in the US where everything gets hyped so quickly and thrown into the bucket right away. Give him that time and space. Maybe it's the one good thing about it in Dortmund that he has that protection. Bosch, I wouldn't be surprised if midweek against Real, he will go back to Yarmolenko and play him instead, just because of the experience and to protect him a little bit from what's going on. Because I think you're right, he looked a little bit overplayed in that game, and that's just normal. He's very young. But before we go to Real Madrid, we had another discussion, didn't we, boys, about Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. And John, you're laughing, so I'm going to go to you first. Is he an efficient striker, yes or no?
Is he efficient? No, but that doesn't mean he's a bad striker. And I think my comments basically come from a position of, I suppose, bemusement when it comes to Aubameyang, because he scores the goals I expect him not to score, and he misses the ones I expect him to score. Now, whether or not that's a problem for Dortmund in the league is one thing. Whether or not it's going to be a problem for them in the Champions League is another thing. And for me, the big question is how he's going to perform this season on the biggest stage, the European stage.
Yeah, I think, and that's something that we said, right? There was a couple that he missed, and then there one goal against Gladbach that he got at impossible angle, and I was like, how did he get that? But that's exactly it. And I know, Chris, you're not the biggest fan of XG, and I don't want to put you too much on the spotlight with that. He did score 31 goals last year, and I don't have the number in my head right now, but I know it was close to 30 years for a striker, a single striker in a Bundesliga season to get above the 30. Last year we had 2, and we're going to talk about Lewandowski in a moment. But, someone who scores 31 goals, it's hard. And you're right. We have spoken many times about the big chances he's missing, but he still gets 31 goals a season.
Yeah, he does. And he scores in gluts, doesn't he? So he scored a hat-trick today. Sorry, not today. He scored a hat-trick this weekend, which, you can't argue he is a world-class striker. I'll quite happily say that. And I enjoy watching him week in, week out. I think he's a brilliant player. Occasionally, he is guilty, especially last season. I know he scored 31 goals, but there was times in games, and I think it was the game away at Augsburg where it was a 0-0 draw, and he had 3 or 4 good chances and missed them. And occasionally that can build up to be a bit of a problem, especially if you want to challenge for the title and you want to consistently challenge, Bayern Munich, who are clinical at times and have been over the past. I know he scored 31 goals last season. My only criticism of him would be, realistically, and I don't say this flippantly, he could have scored over 40 goals last season, because it's the positions he gets himself in. He's an exceptionally clever striker, and he is always in the right position at the right time. If he could just find the right finish all the time, he would be one of the best strikers I've ever seen. And I'm not going to complain too much because, he scores consistently and he scores regularly. He won the Cannon last season and he scored over 30 goals. So you shouldn't be in a position where you can not criticise, but maybe not be as pleased as you could be. But I do think last season he could have hit 40 goals quite easily had he had a little bit more refinement to his finishing. And that sounds like a criticism, but believe me, it's not. He's a fantastic player. I just think he could be even better.
Yeah, how much. This is something that I've always wondered, because it wasn't until until his second season at Dortmund that Klopp moved him to that center forward position, right? They sold Lewandowski and brought in Immobile, who didn't work out, and then they moved Aubameyang to the center, and then he started scoring. But you almost wonder if that's some of that ability to score the impossible ones and sometimes let the easy ones, pass up on the easy ones. I wonder if that's because he's played as a striker later on, as an all-and-out forward, that center forward position later on in his career. And that's something I always wonder about. When you look at his heat map, he does still like to come from that left side quite a lot, right? He is also a lot in that box, but it's just something that I wonder about sometimes when I see him. I say, maybe it's because he came to that position a little bit later than you normal strikers. When you look at someone like, I know Higuain has left some big chances over his career too, but that's a guy who's only in the box. That's where he will always find it. Lewandowski, same thing. He was never playing on a different position. Maybe drops deep a little bit, but he is an all-in-all striker. And I just wonder, and that's maybe something that we can discuss a little bit, right? Is it maybe because his positional play?
Well, yeah, I mean, Thierry Henry is a central striker who started in a different position, and I don't think you could argue the same about him, that he probably missed more than he scored, and that's another flippant comment, because Aubameyang does score a lot. But yeah, maybe he's not as a refined a striker because he's not an out-and-out striker. So yeah, we maybe shouldn't criticise him too much because he's banging goals in left, right, and centre. Maybe it's just a statement. That he could do even better, which is probably quite hard to do when you're scoring 31 goals a season.
Yeah. I think what's interesting to note is the fact that last season he scored 2 penalties and missed 2 penalties. I think that probably indicates something to do with the fact that he is maybe a little bit off on when it comes to actual finishing where you would expect him to finish. Now, there's any number of reasons why that might be the case. He may have confidence issues, and I suppose if he thinks, I'm less likely to score this, he will not feel the pressure of it as much. But he reminds me a lot of, I mentioned this on the group chat, but Edison Cavani is a similar player who, in certain positions where you expect him to score, he seems to miss, and he just then scores incredible goals. That the header against Celtic last week, where he just looped it into the far corner in just the most incredible way, is a classic example. The question becomes, I suppose, is it going to be problematic for Dortmund? And I think where it will become problematic will be, is it to have a striker who is going to score all of the nailed-on chances, or is it better to have a striker who is going to score the chances that you might not expect them to score? I suppose that's up for grabs. But to me, implicitly, inherently, it feels a little bit more like you want a striker who's going to just put everything in that is created as a safe chance.
Yeah, and I mean that is a good connection now to go to Real Madrid game. And that is the number one thing. Against Real Madrid, they will not have as many chances as they had against Borussia Mönchengladbach. I mean, it'd be massively surprised. So he will have to score those chances. And last year they did. So last year, of course, they got their 2 results, the 2 draws. And that it meant that they won the group ahead of Real Madrid. But they're only going to be able to do that if they are efficient. And that's really, one of the 2 big questions mark I have with Borussia Dortmund. If they play like they did against Gladbach, I'm not too worried up front, but I'm actually really worried about the defense. That's, Chris, we've discussed Dortmund's defense, I feel like, ever since we've been on this pod.
Forever.
Yeah, and this, as great as the Gladbach game was, there was, Gladbach with their 21% ball possession could have scored 2 or 3 goals in the first half.
Yeah, they could. And I've just written the preview for Football Start this evening, and I've gone for 3-2 to Dortmund, and partly because of Real's travelling problems that they've had when they've come over to Germany. I know they've had a little bit of success the last couple of seasons, but historically they haven't been particularly good travellers to Germany. But with Dortmund in the form that they're in, I can easily see them scoring a couple of goals. A 3 might be a bit of a push, but I can also see them leaking some goals, especially to a team of Real Madrid's calibre. So if you would put Real Madrid into the weekend's game, and if they played, let's just say, on a similar sort of level to Gladbach, then you're quite right. It could have been a 6-6 draw with a team as clinical as Real Madrid and as able as Real Madrid. We could have had an exceptionally high scoring draw game, and that's the only problem. I don't know if Toprak settled completely yet. Obviously, I was at Wembley for the Tottenham game where Sokratis and Piszczek were just turned inside out by Son and Kane at will. And it was almost every time, Tottenham drove down their left-hand side onto the Dortmund's right-hand side of centre-back and, right back and right-sided centre-back, which was Piszczek and Sokratis. They looked like they could score at will. And, it could have been a lot more than the score was in the end. So Dortmund sort of came away from that, luckily, I would say, but don't forget Berkey had a horrendous evening, letting in a couple of near-post goals. But that will worry me. If we look at the side that started against Gladbach, it is Sokratis and Piszczek, and I would be surprised if it was to be changed, to be honest, on that right-hand side. Just the last time out, so match day 1 in the Champions League, that was an area of major concern for me, along with the holding 3 for that particular game, which didn't really work that well until about 10-12 minutes in, and of course we'd had a couple of goals by then.
This is what was so frustrating about the Gladbach game as well, is that it felt as though Gladbach were focusing on Borussia Dortmund's strength, which is their attack. And they'll get away with this a lot this season, I think, because a lot of teams will think, how on earth are we going to contain them if they're scoring 6 against Gladbach? And Gladbach are going to be arguably top half of the top half. How on earth are we going to stop them? Whereas, actually, if you look at that defence, it's so weak that I was just disappointed that Gladbach weren't just trying to pepper that defence over and over again, trying to Dortmund's line is so high that when you've got wingers like Torgan Hazard, when you've got players like Stindl, you would just expect them to try and find that space in behind the defence over and over and over again. That's what clubs in the Champions League will do. They've got players to exploit that. They're not going to be as worried about that forward 3. They're just going to go for it, and Dortmund could struggle.
Yeah, I think that the Weigl, and that's my last point on Dortmund, I think Weigl in that holding midfield will help them quite a bit, with that high defensive line, because he's just better at hanging on the ball. He's more of a contributor. But Dortmund are not the only side that are playing Champions League midweek. So we want to move on to Dortmund's biggest competitor in the Bundesliga. And it does look like, we have a competitive Bundesliga because Bayern did what many expected they would do. They reacted to a sense of crisis by, winning their last weekend's game 4-0 against Mainz, and then midweek won 3-0 against Schalke. And then, of course, many people were saying, okay, well, here we go. Here's Bayern, they're now angry and they are going to march away with it again. But, big but, and I can't believe I'm actually got to see this in my lifetime. They gave away a 2-0 lead at the Allianz Arena against Wolfsburg. That was maybe for me the biggest surprise of the match day. And those second 45 minutes, if I was a Bayern fan, I'd be really worried about those second 45 minutes because they were not only complacent, they were slow, they were lackluster. Ancelotti didn't seem like he had a match plan for the second 45 minutes. He's, of course, thrown his players under the bus since. Statements saying we were too slow, we didn't react, we were too sluggish. Stefan Effenberg with some interesting comments after the game. Thomas Müller said it was a step back. We've been kind of waiting for this to happen, right, Chris? I mean, since we started doing this pod, we've kind of seen this coming, and I think has it finally arrived? Has Bayern's window closed?
Well, since we've started this pod, which is not far off a year, really, Bayern have stuttered throughout the whole of that. I know they've won the league again, and they got through to the quarterfinal of the Champions League, but it didn't feel like a totally dominant Bayern last season. They were pushed quite hard by Leipzig at times. And I remember saying, and I think I've said it even during this season, during the small part of the season that we've done already, is that they can occasionally be a little boring. And that was something that was labelled for them last season. They didn't really have and you're quite right, you said there didn't seem to be a match plan for the second half. That was a constant throughout last season for Bayern. They sort of just looked to plod through games and occasionally pick up a very good win, a very high 4 or 5 or 6-0. And then they would just scrape through for some of the other games. And yeah, this was a Bayern problem which has all come together in this game, and I don't think you would have envisaged them to go 2-0 up and then to leak 2 goals to Wolfsburg, who have been in an awful vein of form, hence why they sacked their head coach, and Martin Schmitz came in and got a sort of response straight away that they were after. So yeah, although it does look like just another problem that Ancelotti's got. I said it midweek when Neuer was diagnosed as going to be out until after January. Could this be another nail in the coffin for Ancelotti at Bayern? Everything that could be going wrong for him at the moment seems to be going wrong, and losing, their star goalkeeper, who is a very important cog, and we chatted about this last week, Manu, didn't we? That, Neuer is so key to the way Bayern plays, very high, is almost like, an extra centre-back or a sweeper when they're playing normally, and they come back to him and his touch and his precision of passing. He's able to smack the ball around easily with will, and, drives the attack on from the very back, from the very back point. He's the foremost point of attack, and they don't seem to have that if he's not there. And I do worry for them at the moment.
Yeah, what I think was really interesting about this game, and the stats backed us up, and it must have been mostly in the second half, because Wolfsburg weren't good in the first half, but Wolfsburg were leading 2 statistics, and that was duels won, aerial duels won. And I felt like that Wolfsburg really fought their way back into this match. And, really, they sprung on the opportunity that Bayern left them to get into this game. And this is, I think other teams going to the Allianz Arena will now say, look, we can get something here. If Wolfsburg can do this, we can do it too. We can go to Munich and we can get a result. And even, I've been trying to look this up. I can't find the statistics. So if you listen to this pod and you want to give us a shout on Twitter, I can't even remember the last time Bayern gave a 2-0 lead away at the Allianz Arena. It must have been ages ago. So, that is something that if I was a Bayern fan, and, other teams will see an opportunity there now. And this is something, I mean, John, you have this saying in our WhatsApp chat. You're calling Lewandowski Penaltovsky. We need to talk about penalties with Bayern, because they got a very soft one in the Wolfsburg game, and they got a very soft one in Schalke too. And in Schalke, it was the VAR that decided it. And again, the ball hit Naldo in the leg, and from the leg it went up to his arm, which is actually by the rule book, or the way the referees have explained the handball to all the coaches and players in the Bundesliga. That's an unintentional play. Yet VAR decided to give Bayern that penalty.
Yeah, this is one of my problems with video refereeing, is that not that I necessarily have a problem with it if it works correctly, but it does feel as though the teams who are going to benefit from VAR are going to be the teams who are more likely to be winning. Now, there's an argument to be made that if you're a better team, you're more likely to be putting the ball into dangerous positions where people are more likely to handball it. But I do think that there's referees have this sort of latent understanding of the way that matches should go. So when there's a team who would be more likely to win a match than lose a match, getting a good chance for a penalty, I think they're probably going to be slightly more likely to give it, because it won't affect the overall outcome of the game too much in their heads. And I think VAR is going to exacerbate that. There are going to be bigger teams getting more VAR decisions as a result of that. And I think this could prove to be problematic, and it'd be interesting to see at the end of the season how the breakdown of VAR decisions actually goes. I will be keeping an eye out for that.
Chris, do you think that referees almost rely too much on it, that they have given up making the crucial decisions themselves and just wait for that call?
I think the problem you have with VAR is that referees now are maybe more conscious that it's on their mind. So pre-VAR, if a referee said that's a penalty or it's not a penalty, he had the confidence in his ability to go with that decision. Now, if he says it's a penalty, or consequently it's not a penalty, as long as the play goes dead, he can get a little whistle in his ear that maybe I should go to VAR for this, so they'll signal for it, and then, lo and behold, he has made a mistake, so he will give it. And I don't know if that weighs on their minds. If you speak to referees, they'll probably say, no, it's not, we're a team, and, it's just as much if I make a mistake, the linesman or the assistant will spot it. It's just another assistant. They've gone from behind the side of the goal to a little room in Cologne, where they get all the pictures. I think the problem is, and you've mentioned this before, Manu, is that we don't see all the angles that they see. So, when a decision is given, we get one television replay, and we can look at it 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20, 100 times, and we can go, I don't know how they've given that. But because we're not allowed to see the third or the fourth angle from what they've made a decision on, we'll never know. And that's a problem that you encountered in the Confederations Cup as well, is that it's not as transparent as maybe we can see. So we only have the benefit of seeing it from one angle, whereas, as we all know, there's cameras all over the ground these days. And the referees, the VAR in Cologne, will get to see 4 or 5 different shots. And for some reason, we're not allowed to see that. And we saw that in the Super Cup, didn't we, where there was a VAR decision for Bayern, and it's not DSF because it was Sport 1, wasn't it, who weren't allowed to show, it was ZDF, sorry.
ZDF, yes.
Yeah, ZDF weren't allowed to show the angle from which the VAR decision was made, which I think's crazy. Yeah,
that's been one of my pet peeves with it, and I think they've gotten a little better, and that they didn't show us, especially with offsides, the lines that they use. We don't see them right. And when I was at the Confederations Cup, you have to understand the reporters, they get the screen in front of you. You have a screen on your desk in the stadium, and we often weren't shown the actual pictures. So now when you are explaining it, either while you're writing or while you're reporting on the game or commentating on the game, you cannot actually explain to the audience what's just happened, because you don't have the image in front of you. And that's a transparency issue. But I almost wonder, you see the referees as a very good commentary in Kicker about that. They have now given up giving referees grades, and they always used to grade the referee at the end of a game at Kicker. 1 the best, 6 the worst. And they have started, we can't do that anymore because essentially the referee has been taken out of the game because it's guys in a van somewhere or in an office somewhere in Cologne making the decisions. And I think that's a pretty strong statement. And I think I'm personally for VAR, but I think there needs to be a balance between having the referee on the field making the last call. And that's something that I think is quite important. I think that's that's something that you mentioned, John, as well. The referee needs to be the one who makes the call on the field. It can't be the guy in the office in Cologne.
Yeah, I think it calls into question the authority on in the game. And this is always the problem. If as soon as the referee ceases to be seen to have the ultimate authority, then you lose something, I think, in terms of the actual authority on the field. And the referee then just kind of feels a little bit like someone who is a bit of a bumbling idiot who runs around, and occasionally someone who knows better than him will radio in and have a chat with him and say, looking at this screen, what you've done here is a mistake. And so I don't think, and I think from the side of the audience as well, I don't think it's particularly helpful, because I watch Bundesliga games now, and I see something where I think, oh, that looks like it could be a thing, but it doesn't go to the video assisted referee, and you kind of feel then as though there's a bit of affront to you. You feel as though you're not getting your value for money on VAR, but at the same time with the game, you're thinking, has he seen this and decided not to contact the referee? Was the referee not seen anything here as well? So, like you say, the issue is with transparency, but there is this underlying authority issue where you kind of think, well, why do they bother having a human referee on the field at all? Is it to presumably to make the game flow better? But then at the same time, you have this authority issue where you're asking the question: this referee doesn't seem to know what he's doing. Why is it that we even bother at all?
Yeah, I think that is something that echoes with me 100%. So I guess that is really a balance that they have to find, and it's a discussion that's ongoing. And this is, we're one season in, so I think you should give it at least a season and see how it goes. But speaking about fixing things, Martin Schmidt, not a great start for him with Wolfsburg, but 2-2 draw now at Bayern, and it's an expensive side that they have in Wolfsburg. Chris, real quick, do you think he's the right man to fix the Volkswagen Club? Is he? Funny enough, he is a mechanic by that's his job. But
brilliant, love it.
Fix the Volkswagen.
Greatest pun of the evening. I don't know. We know why Mainz let him go last season was because he dragged them too close to relegation. So I'm unsure. There's times during the last season with Mainz where I thought that he got a team which wasn't the best to perform admirably. He has now got the chance to work with some really good names. If you just look at the midfield three and then the centre forward, Divock Origi, who I know very well from a Liverpool perspective, don't know him personally, should probably quantify that. He has got some talents to work with now. So will he be able to bring his coaching ability forward? I don't know. Maybe I'll reserve judgment on him for a few match days, but he certainly got the response that he needed and would have desired at half-time in the Allianz. So from that 45 minutes, he sort of got the reaction that we would expect to see. Is it a new manager bounce? How long will they have it for? Are they going to come across teams who aren't as good as Bayern Munich, and will they be able to exploit that? Because they've had a good second half. I thought the midweek game, was a reasonable start. Although, the attendance was pretty poor, wasn't it, by a Bundesliga standard? It looked half empty at one point. So that must be a worry, for everyone at Wolfsburg, especially for Volkswagen, because I was there for their relegation first leg playoff last season. So, they probably don't want to find themselves in that area again. So for me, it's a bit of a strange appointment, but you know what you're getting with him. He knows the league very well. He knows all the clubs he's going to play very well. I didn't think that Hecking would be a particularly good managerial sign-in for Gladbach, and was proven wrong on that. So I'll probably reserve judgment for a bit, Manu.
Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. Of course, want to move over to our next Champions League side, but real quick, I did write the preview on Bayern, and based on what I've seen in this game in particular, I really worry about Bayern, and I think that game on Wednesday, Bayern PSG, will be an interesting one to watch, because I think things could come to an early boil there. So we'll cover that maybe next week. But Leipzig, they are a side that for the first time ever really have to deal with this weekend, midweek, really constantly. And I think the only one who's taken that in strides is Timo Werner, who's been very consistent this season. And the rest of the team, not so much, right? I mean, I thought the game against Frankfurt, that was the game I watched on Saturday. I thought they were very good at times. Timo Werner was excellent, but they also, you can sense that it isn't quite as easy for them as it was last year. And I mean, John, you follow Leipzig a bit as well. It seems like that is something that they just have to get used to a little bit, especially with the way they're playing.
Yeah, my big worry with Leipzig is whether or not they have squad depth, which I think I'm a little bit bemused as to why we haven't brought this up before, because obviously we knew they were going to have this schedule that was going to be ram-packed. And it seems to me what's happened is with Naby Keita picking up an injury early on and then getting a fairly long ban in the Bundesliga, they've struggled without him, and they haven't really had the sort of personnel that you would want them to have in the central midfield areas in particular to really kick on so far. Ilsanko, I don't think, is anywhere near as good a replacement as Keita, and yet he's had to fill in that gap a few times now. Augustin, I think, has been good up front, but again, you kind of think if they lose a couple of players here and there in important positions, who do they bring in? And as soon as you have something like a run of tight fixtures over the course of a couple of weeks, then it can all come crumbling down for you. And it seems as though that's what happened to them in their last Champions League fixture. Yeah,
and then they're playing Besiktas now midweek. The result against Frankfurt, I think, for me personally, is an indication that they're slightly back on track. They're now sixth after 6 games, with 10 points, 2 points behind Hannover, 3 points behind Bayern. So, they're not really that far off the pace, considering it just seems a little bit more sluggish than last year. And I think that is probably down to the Champions League. But you are quite right identifying that with Naby Keita. They think, and with the way Naby Keita plays, that he is a little bit injury prone, but he's also a guy who's always a little bit on that edge because of getting several bookings this season, or going off, with red card, because he does work a little bit above that limit. And I agree with you. They will have to find that solution eventually, because he's going to Liverpool next season, right? And they will have to find someone. So that's, for me, an interesting one. And the one thing that I really like, I know I say this every week almost, Timo Werner, he keeps on scoring. He has now scored 16 goals in the last 17 games. Now that's a scoring rate for a 21-year-old striker, and that's efficiency as well. But Chris, I want to go over to the next team, and this has been something that's I find really impressive. And we were worrying a little bit about Hoffenheim and how they were going to deal with that English week, same as Leipzig. Turns out they're dealing with it really well. They're second. They're sandwiched between Dortmund and Bayern, and it looks like they're doing exactly what they're doing last year. They're like a little hamster picking up points here and there without ever losing.
Yeah, and they've gone above my expectation with them. And I'd still think that going out the Champions League is the best thing that will have happened for them this season, and to go into that Europa League. And they've not had, the best of starts, but let's remember that they've not had that much experience. I think the pressure is off in that competition for them. It's a go out and have a good time. Whereas had they got through to Champions League group stages, I think they would have had a lot more pressure on their shoulders. And consequently, that's allowing them to play with the freedom in the Bundesliga that we saw them play with last season. I thought they had a fantastic win at Mainz. Sometimes there's nothing better than a really late win. It really forges the team cohesion, and when you score a goal in added time to win a match, I always think that's a really good springboard to carry on. And they did that on the weekend's game as well. And yeah, they were good. I was there for match day 1, and they weren't that particularly good, but I think we can forgive them on that because it was the first match day. So they've settled well after that. I thought, bar the display at Anfield, I think they have been a constant again. And I'm excited to see them break into this top 4, and I hope that they can stay in there, because I do believe that a good crack at the Bundesliga, maybe not at the title, but a good crack to be in that race and to be there or thereabouts, maybe till March or April, would be good for them and would stand them in good stead for next season. I think they're a project still, and the project's looking very good if they can keep hold of Nagelsmann. I think that's the big question as we look to the future, because I think in 2 or 3 seasons, Hoffenheim could be good challengers to the likes of Bayern and Dortmund, and be knocking on the door to either upstage one of them for second, or maybe even get that elusive title that they've been after. It's just whether they can keep hold of Nagelsmann, because I think he's the key to everything about them. He's the key to the way they play. He's the key to the way they just randomly come out with different tactics. We've talked at great length about the brilliant, innovative coach that he's brought and the innovative ways of coaching he's brought to the club. And I think everything around Hoffenheim is to do with Julian Nagelsmann. And if Julian Nagelsmann was to leave, I think there would be a massive void that maybe Hoffenheim couldn't fill.
Yeah, I would go along with that. The latest I've heard from Munich, and that's, of course, the club that plays a little bit of a bigger role in his dreams, as an actual quote. They are monitoring him, but they feel that he needs a good, a long time to mature to the level. Remember, he's only 30. He's younger than, I believe, anyone on this pod. So that's astonishing. But they feel that he needs a bit more time. The word that I've heard from Munich is that Thomas Tuchel will be, if something goes wrong with Ancelotti, that will be the guy that they want to bring in. Mainly because that's what Pep Guardiola actually told him to bring in for him. And I still think maybe that would have been the better choice. So that's what I'm hearing from Munich. I find that very interesting. But I also find very interesting what Nagelsmann has been doing. And you're saying the tactics, and I look at different homepages for different formations, and they're all translating on what he has put on the pitch in different ways. One of them even has Andrej Kramaric playing in a midfield behind Gnabry and Uth, and then Geiger almost like a libero. Geiger has been that revelation for them, hasn't he, John? A guy we're wondering who's going to replace. Who's going to play Sebastian Rudy, and it turns out it's Dennis Geiger is that guy. He has been phenomenal.
Yeah, he's been good, and like you said, with losing Süle and Rudy, there was always the option that Hoffenheim could really struggle this season. But it seems to be part of Nagelsmann's project to develop a team where he is building, he's bringing in players who know what they're doing, they know where they fit, they know what's expected of them, and so it doesn't matter so much if you lose a couple of players. You have the resources and the players there to bring in and replace them. So actually, interesting comparison there to what we just said about RB Leipzig, about worrying about RB Leipzig's squad depth. You don't really seem to have the same worry with respect to Hoffenheim's squad depth. You can take out Sandro Wagner, who was so instrumental to them last season, and bring in Marut, who obviously flourished under Nagelsmann when Nagelsmann first took over at the club. And it feels as though there's so many areas like that where you don't worry about Hoffenheim losing a player, because you know exactly, because they are so tactically changeable. You know that the players will be able to sub in, cover for Nagelsmann where he needs them. So I've been really impressed with them. And coming back to their recent form, what's I think for me the rudest sign of their health at the moment is the fact that they're fourth on the list of goals scored in the Bundesliga, and also fourth in the list of goals conceded, lowest goals conceded. So it seems that in both areas he's got them performing to a decent level. They're not conceding too many, and they are scoring a lot of goals. And I think that's the formula that you need to do well. If you can be fourth on both of those lists, then you're likely to finish in the top four in the table.
Yeah, and of course, top four this year is more valuable than ever before, because Champions League reform means top four is an automatic Champions League spot. They wouldn't have to worry about facing someone like Liverpool in the playoffs next year. They would be straight into the group stage. If you finish top four, and with the way they're getting the results, they would. And I think you pointing out something very important here, and that's they're the only German side, and I include Bayern and Dortmund in this, who have squad depth on every position. And that's even strikers. They have 3 or 4 strikers that they can just interchange. And that's something that, I wrote an article about that last year during the early Champions League, Europa League exit of all the German teams, is that German teams have lack of depth up front. There's very few strikers in the top teams, and Hoffenheim are the exception, because they have Kramaric, they have Uth, they have Wagner, they have Gnabry, and then they have 2 or 3 guys from the youth academy that they can throw in there. And that is remarkable. Nagelsmann is not worried about, throwing in someone in the deep end and just saying, like, here you go. So, that's something that makes me quite positive. They had a poor start to the Europa League, but they are away in Ludogorets. I'm pretty sure they're going to get the 3 points there and rectify the slip on match day 1. So that's, of course, a game that we're also going to have a preview for on fußballstadt.com. Real quick, Hertha against Ostersunds. Hertha has been maybe one of the more boring sides in the Bundesliga, so I don't want to spend too much time on them, but they will have to get a result at Ostersunds. A team that has us all a little bit worried, Chris, is Cologne. And they were playing against the feel-good story of the early Bundesliga season, which is Hannover. They got a 0-0 draw, which is a point, but where Cologne are, as much as this is a success for Hannover, it's still a disappointment for Cologne, right? Because that point will not be enough.
Yeah, and we're now on, we're now just finished match day 6, and they've got 1 point. We're starting to get to that point of the season where, we're starting to look at a considerable amount's gone, and the gap is starting to become evident. If you look at the gap to 15th, which is the clear of any relegation worry, it's 5 points at the moment. I don't know where Cologne are going to get 5 points on the bounce from, where everybody else is going to lose at the moment. And this is a big worry, because before they know it, we could be on match day 10 or match day 12, and there could be a considerable gap. And as we found out last season, Manu, the way the league panned out, is that you could be in 9th and still be dragged down into a relegation fight. So they need to be able to get themselves up to somewhere like 9th or 10th and give themselves a fighting chance. Now, at the moment, they're going to have to go on a 3-game winning streak while all the teams around them lose. It's a hard ask, and for them to get that 1 point today, okay, maybe it will give some breathing and some confidence to them that they've got a point on match day 6. But, I do fear for them now, because they're in this, they themselves have got this English week in, week out, and they're in the Europa League, so they're going to be playing in obscure times. Most of their matches are going to come on a Sunday, because they're going to play Sunday, Thursday. And Sunday's not an ideal day to play when you're trying to play catch-up, because you're looking at everybody else playing before you, and then the pressure's on you even more. And then, we look next week. They are, again, playing on Sunday. It's the last game of the weekend. It's a live televised fixture, so that brings the Sky cameras down and the Sky outside broadcast, and it brings all the pressure that comes with that. And they're hosting RB Leipzig. And if they're not to pick up any points there, which at the moment, if you look at the way Leipzig are playing and who they've got, the likes of Werner, who we discussed at great length, I would fear that he'd have a field day against Cologne at the moment. And all of a sudden, then we're into match day 8. And are they still at the rock bottom with 1 point? And then the pressure comes on Stoger. And how long's he going to be able to last in with that pressure on him? And I thought that Cologne, after last season, would fly in both Europe and the Bundesliga, and I thought they would probably be round about the 7th or the 8th mark come the season end. At the moment, I really fear for them that they could be locked into a relegation battle now in what is September.
I think it's important as well to notice that their goal difference is minus 12. The closest to that is minus 7. They're 5 goals off on goal difference at the moment, and that just means that you add an extra minus point to your points total, because even if they manage to get level points with someone else, it's unlikely that they're going to overtake them on goal difference. So they've just made it so hard for themselves in that regard as well.
Yeah, they dug a deep hole for themselves. I would totally go along with that. And of course, John, you know how that feels, because Gladbach have done something very similar. And Schalke did the same thing last season, start the season with 5 defeats straight up. And it doesn't get easier. They are hosting Red Star Belgrade on Thursday, resurgent Serbian side, historic Serbian side. And going from that game then to the Sunday fixture against RB Leipzig. And of course, Leipzig are midweek in Istanbul, so a bit of travel. That's maybe the only positive out of that. But I am worried about Köln. I think this season will be relegation battle for them. There's no doubt about it. And that's hard given, the high that they were in last year. On the opposite spectrum, we have Hannover, 4th. Chauner with another clean sheet. Wow, I did not see that coming. I thought maybe Stuttgart could pull this off, but Hannover, I think this is, and we discussed this already a little bit last week, but what a start for them. This is maybe the surprise, and this brings us to the final topic. We are now 6 games in. I know it's really early to talk about the top 4 and all that, and we've seen quite a few games now. We can see some early indication. John, I go to you first. Based on what you've seen, 6 games in, we have a top 4 right now. Who do you think is going to be in that top 4 at the end of the season, and why?
Do you want me to give you an order?
I think if you just name the top 4, that's fine.
I'm going to say I think Dortmund will easily be there. I think they'll finish top. I'm saying that now, partly because I feel as though they might actually not make it through the group stages of the Champions League. And if that is the case, they're going to absolutely fly the league. The question of second for me is between Hoffenheim and Bayern Munich. That will depend on whether or not Bayern can sort themselves out with enough time, and whether or not Hoffenheim can keep chipping away, like you said, at the league, and whether or not they continue very far in the Europa League. And then when it comes to the elusive 4th spot, it's hard to see Hanover staying in that position for the rest of the season. And the big question then becomes who's going to fit in there. The main candidates for me are going to be RB Leipzig. Whether or not they can sort out their season, get a little bit of momentum going like they had last season, and maybe pull their way up towards the top 4. Schalke have looked okay, although for me they probably are conceding a few too many at the moment. So I wonder whether or not that will work out for them. And then I hate to join Manu on the Bayer Leverkusen train, but they've been scoring a lot of goals, and if they can sort out their defensive problems, then they maybe will climb up the table. So I'm going to go for Dortmund top. Dortmund top, Hoffenheim and Munich fighting out over the 2nd and 3rd places, and then one of those 3, Leipzig, Schalke, or Leverkusen.
Yeah, I'm going to give my opinion last, but Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with John. Dortmund look like early title contenders. So I'll go with that. And then Hoffenheim and Munich fighting, and Bayern fighting it out for second and third. And I think, from a personal point, I think RB Leipzig don't have the squad depth. And I think when we get to November, December time, just before the Champions League goes into a break, the fixtures come thick and fast, and you throw in the Pokal in there as well. I think they will just dip off slightly, and then probably won't have enough to regain it when the fixtures come thick and fast again, round about the February-March stage. So I'll discount RB Leipzig. And apart from that, I'm in full agreement. It's going to be somewhere between Schalke and, unfortunately, Manu, it looks like it could be right because Leverkusen is steaming up the table. So it will be a close fight for fourth between Bayer Leverkusen and Schalke, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm actually in pretty close agreement with you guys. I think Bayern and Dortmund are probably going to fight over the title. And I think Dortmund will edge it this year. I just have an odd feeling. I don't agree with you, John. I think it doesn't matter if Dortmund stay in the Champions League or not. I think they will stay in the Champions League, but I don't think it really matters. I think they still have enough to win it. Bayern, just the window is closing for me. And Hoffenheim, I think Hoffenheim are going to finish third because they're just going to consistently get their points. And I watched the Leverkusen game today, and boy, their forward line is looking good. And they don't have to worry about any midweek games ever. So they can, when Leipzig and all these other teams that they're midweek, if they get used to like playing there, they can just rest. And in Alario, the Argentine striker, he scored today. Volland had 2 goals again, I think, today. So he's getting going. They're looking good. Bailey looked really good too. I think it's coming, and I think they will finish at least fourth. I know I said title challenge, that was maybe a bit much, but they will get their Champions League spot. They will be back in the Champions League next year. So yeah, that's my top 4. So I think we're pretty much all in agreement, more or less. I'm curious to see how it pans out over the next few weeks. I think, Chris, you always say around match day 10, that's the magic number, right? That's when we get to really see.
Yeah, try and avoid the league table for a bit. Yeah. But yeah, match day 10, I think everyone will settle down and we'll have a real good indication. But at the moment, the top 3 look pretty cemented into those positions. It's just who's going to join them in that elusive 4th slot. Yeah,
well, interesting one to follow for sure. I think that's pretty much it, guys. We're sadly out of time. But John, what are you up to this week? What's going on? I know you're doing some previews for Fußballstart and Football Grad, and you are in Manchester for the Shakhtar game.
That's right. I'm really excited to get accreditation for the Manchester City Shakhtar Donetsk game on Tuesday, so I'll be heading up there. I'm covering Shakhtar for Football Grad. But the way that Manchester City are playing at the moment, I'm quite excited about that too. So I get to see them in their pomp. And then a couple of previews. So I'm doing the preview for the Manchester City game against Shakhtar, and then I'm doing the RB Leipzig preview against Besiktas. So that's what I'm doing this week.
Yeah, those Tuesday for the Tuesday games, they will be up by the time the pod is out. And Chris, you're pretty much doing the same thing right now, right? You're covering the Dortmund game, I believe. That's pretty
that's done. That's done, boss, as we speak.
Yeah, nice. So anything else going on this week? I know you're moving to London.
Just outside London. So, yes, I am moving. I'm going back to school at the ripe old age of 39. I start a broadcast journalism and creative media course on Monday, purely to help me get a better job, Manu, because, you sometimes need to increase your portfolio. So, yeah, I'll be doing that. So, I am moving tomorrow. So that is my big lookout for this week, which unfortunately now puts us on the doorstep of Tottenham Hotspur, Chelsea and Arsenal for all the European games.
Oh, that's really horrible. Well, I'm looking forward to all that coverage coming our way. Yeah, that's the same for me. Previews, basically all this week. Previous. Tuesday games will be up by the time the pod is out. All the Wednesday games will be out on Monday. Europa League games will be out on Tuesday. So yeah, stay tuned on that. All of that can be found at Football Grad Live on our Twitter feed. We are also on Facebook. Footballgrad, our Facebook account, and we're on Instagram as well, and Footballgrad. And also for these podcasts, we're on iTunes. So if you're listening to us on Acast or you found us on the homepage, we're always on iTunes, and we really do appreciate if you leave us a review. Tell us what we do right, tell us what we do wrong, criticism, tips, hints, questions. Please give us a review. They're always welcome. They help us to get better. They help us to grow. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. And until next week, auf Wiedersehen.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen, ich hab zu holen.
Imagine if you could shop the shelves of all your local liquor stores at the same time. Well, spoiler alert, you can with Drizzly, the #1 alcohol delivery app. Drizzly lets you compare prices from local liquor stores on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your door in under 60 minutes. And right now, Drizzly is giving all new customers $5 off their first order. Just enter promo code SAVE5 at checkout. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.